I was 13 and we had emigrated 8 years before, and my parents were watching the news all the time, of course, but getting really frustrated with the coverage of events on the BBC, so they were constantly trying to get onto Czech radio. And one day they were driving in Greenwich and they realised they suddenly managed to tune in to Czech radio. And just as they did, literally as they tuned in, they heard that the Czech government had fallen. And they had to stop the car because they couldn't drive anywhere in case they'd lost the connection. So they stopped and they listened, and they just cried in the car. And then they drove home and they said to us, "We're going to Prague." So we got in the car, and then my brother was 16, so he refused to go without his girlfriend, so we were crushed, all of us, into the back of the car, and we drove to Prague. We came into this massive celebration. It was like walking into a festival, and the atmosphere was so extraordinary and joyful. I'd never seen something so joyful and free. And I've got so many memories, but one of the strongest memories for me was going up to the castle for Havel's first speech after he'd been voted in, and walking up the steps to the castle. I mean, not walking, we were crushed, you couldn't move. And I really remember the physical feeling of being able to lift my feet off the floor without falling over, because it was that squashed in. And it was really extraordinary because we were on the wrong side of the castle. We didn't even get anywhere near to hearing the speech. But what I really remember is that a friend was there with a 2-year-old child, and the child got very scared and he began to cry, and he really wanted to get out. And in that crush, it was not long after the Hillsborough disaster here, and we were terrified. And in that crush, that massive crowd parted and made way for this dad and his son, and everyone worked together and called to each other, and that was just such a sign of what people were capable of in that atmosphere and in that time. I think for me it was a huge reconnection with the country, and I then I went back for a summer, age 15. I moved back for a year when I was 18, and that I think, having spent my childhood kind of adjusting to the UK and learning to speak English and understanding how to be an English kid, it was a very sudden and abrupt reconnection with that heritage. Heritage we'd left really not very long before. So I feel just incredibly grateful to my parents that they just put us in a car and took us there, because it was such an unforgettable experience to be there for that Christmas. It's bittersweet because it was such an extraordinary and beautiful time, and it really wasn't long before things changed there. And of course many things changed for the better, but the way that capitalism took hold of the country and that city especially so fast, in a way that people weren't ready for. It seems already a year later, it was such a different world. So now when I look at what's happening in the country and the demonstrations that have been happening not long ago, it feels really bittersweet to look back on that time, and to think of the hope that people had. But it feels really important to also hold on to the good that it really brought out in people, and that solidarity that's possible. So I will never forget that time. It gives me a kind of understanding of human nature that I won't ever lose. So this is my flag. And this was this was the flag that I waved. It's very small, but it's significant.